Welcome to Mid Maryland Votes. I am your host, Mark Flynn. With me is my co host,
Ethan Lowen.
and tonight we're going to discuss the topic, which is how did we get here? How do we get to two political parties, Democrats and Republicans, who no longer just disagree, they literally hate each other? How do we get here? What do you think, Ethan?
Well, I think it's been a long road. In my particular case, I come from a family that is evenly split between Democrats and Republicans, so I had a firsthand seat to the changes that have occurred over the years.
I too. I grew up in a Democrat in outside of Boston, Massachusetts. My parents worked for the Kennedy campaign. I myself was a kid for Carter, and I also worked for Teddy Kennedy and his campaign. And that Democratic background has now split. Many of those people that I grew up with are Republicans. Some are still Democrats, and they are at each other's throats.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and as I said, it has been a long time coming or developing. Similar to you, my family, that's from Long Island, they were politically active in the Democrat Party. I mean, so again, just being able to see what things were like decades ago versus today, and there's been many stops along the way.
Yeah, back in the day, I mean, I remember, President Reagan, who was, reviled by many Democrats. Tip O'Neill, which was the Speaker of the House back then, he was a Massachusetts Democrat. He and Reagan used to spar all day long, fight on the floor to pass different bills from different directions. Definitely were enemies on the floor, but at night they used to get together, drink beers together, and talk about Ireland and their Irish history together, and they were friends off the floor. Those days are long gone, and I gotta believe that social media had a lot to do with this, and of course legacy media, and this really um, strong emotions that liberals and conservatives have for each other.
Yes, years ago, it didn't matter whether you were a Democrat or Republican. You got along fine. I mean, it just was not a topic of contention, whereas now it is. And I agree with you. I think that it actually started with the legacy media over 20 years ago. From my perspective, I seem to have noticed it beginning with the coverage on the Gulf War, with George Bush Jr. And that's where it seemed like there was a narrative that started to show up, and then politics became more of a intense discussion, not just a casual discussion.
Yeah, I think the Gulf War definitely was the start of a lot, and it was the Bush presidency. But even back then, the difference between Clinton and Bush was barely discernible. I mean, those presidencies were very similar. I mean, small things, maybe their stance on abortion, maybe tax and spend as opposed to cutting taxes. But the reality was, policy wise, I mean, even up to Obama, the policies were pretty much the same. You know, I mean, for instance, Trump is the only president who ever openly supported gay marriage before he was president. He's the only one. Obama didn't do it. Hillary didn't do it. Clinton didn't do it. None of those people stood up for gay marriage except Trump. And it's interesting to me that, that just goes to show you that politics back then, there was very little difference between the parties. I mean, some major points of contention, sure, but by and large, on the big things, they were pretty unified.
Absolutely. And really, that goes all the way back to the 1960s, where one of the biggest criticisms about the campaign between JFK Jr. and Richard Nixon was that they really had no differences in what they were talking about during debates. So it made for boring debates. And you're correct, that remained true for decades. And then suddenly, there was this massive shift. And yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that then social media came into play, and that started that when social media came into play, the algorithms of social media really run off of contention, emotional distress,
Mhm.
and showing things that cause us emotional distress, and we can't underplay the effect that that has had.
And legacy media, the same way. I mean, they want ratings. They don't care about, posting about the Tip O'Neill Reagan friendship. You would never have seen that in the legacy media. It was them talking badly about each other on the floor of the Senate. That's what you saw. So, the bottom line is that the legacy media is hooked to conflict and, not having resolution, not seeing eye to eye. People not being, they don't want a kumbaya moment. They want, people throwing, visceral and adjectives at each other.
Yes, and it has had an impact. I mean, when you look at, CNN, NBC, they've been raising the alarms just over the past month, talking about how the impact it's having on society, particularly with how the parties are viewed. I mean, they're saying just in the last couple of weeks, a lot of reporting on how the Democratic Party has reached an all-time record low for the history of their surveys, where it's now less than 30% approval, going back to 1992 when CNN started their surveys, and 1990 when NBC started their surveys. And I have to say that I don't think that's a healthy situation for our country to be in. I mean, it has served us very well to have had two political parties that are very competitive. And if there is this breakdown, where one seems to be a lot less likable, or whatever the proper word is, supported, where one party is supported much less by a group of Americans, then that does not serve us well.
Yeah, no, 23%. That was a CNN poll, by the way, not a Gallup poll. The CNN poll had 52% of Democrats believed the party was going in the wrong direction. 52%. And 23% of was the approval rating for the Democratic leadership, the leadership in the Senate and the Congress. 23% approval rate. That's the lowest approval rating in the history of CNN polling Democratic leadership.
And I believe in that poll as well, it showed that 52% of Democrats want the Democratic Party to move more towards the middle politically and socially. And what's interesting is when I read that, I couldn't help but be reminded of the fact that when we look at one of the factors of the last, really, I would say 15 or so years, is the number of Democrats that have moved over and not necessarily become Republicans per se, but have moved into the conservative camp. I think probably one of the names that is most familiar to people is Bill Maher, a long time, very liberal comedian, who one day stated, that what he's seeing the Democratic Party become politically, socially, he can't identify with, even though, as he stated, his politics never changed.
Yeah, basically, Bill Maher said that he didn't leave the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party left him.
Yes.
And the ultra liberal bent of the party has lost the mainstream Democrats. I mean, most of the mainstream Democrats, they're not down with a lot of the ultra liberal positions, the anti-Israel position, the anti-American position, the burning the American flags, all that stuff. Most Democrats are, they're just like conservatives in the sense that they're patriotic people. They pay their taxes. They might be some differences in some ways, but they're not down with all that liberal nonsense.
And really, I mean, I can attest to that in the sense that the Democrats that I've known my entire life, whether in my family, whether friends that I grew up with, again, their politics have not really changed. And yet, yes, they have made note that the politics of the Democratic Party have changed. And it's not just Bill Maher. I mean, when you think of Joe Rogan, who is now apparently the most followed human being on earth. Well, he is another one who has stated that he was a lifelong liberal. And he basically, like as Bill Maher stated, said that the Democratic Party's policies have left him. He never changed his politics. And now he has actually been a tremendous source of Republican votes over the last election. And you can actually go down the list and find a number of people like that, including Mike Pence, President Trump's first vice president. Started out his political career as a Democrat and then switched to Republican over 35 years ago. And that is just a common theme that we have seen.
I think we've also seen independents. More and more people are trying to register as independent. Before they thought their vote was being thrown away. Now they are solidly voting, and they solidly did vote for the Trump presidency. That was just undeniable. 72 or 78% of independents voted Republican this last election. Trump had gains in the black vote, black male vote, the male vote overall, the male vote of under 30 young males came out in droves to vote Republican. Heck, he even got the Mennonites and the Amish to vote for him. So, I mean, the Democratic Party has a major issue right now. They're not appealing to their base, and their base is like, look, you left us behind. We don't support all that radical nonsense. We care about the same thing the conservatives do. We want to be able to feed our family. We want to be able to live affordably. We don't want inflation. We don't want to be involved in overseas wars and pumping millions and billions of dollars into other economies. We want to take care of Americans. And I mean, even the Democrats are down with that. They may not say they're MAGA, make America great again, but they certainly want America to be first. And for a long time, some of these liberals, I mean, I'm talking about the progressive liberals, I'm talking about the far left. They have not put America first, and they've lost their base.
Absolutely. And what's interesting is one of the things that CNN poll showed too is that it pointed out that if you go back to Trump's first term, there was about 33% of the Democratic Party wanted the Democratic Party to actively fight against the policies of the Trump administration. And when you go fast forward now to 8 years later, and what you find out is that or I should say 10 years later, what you find out is that it is now 65% of the Democratic Party wants the Democrats to actively fight against Donald Trump's policies. Now, this isn't a statement on whether or not his policies are good or bad. It just goes to show that as the Democratic Party has shrank and more lifelong Democrats have identified as independents or identified now as Republicans, there has been a growing percentage of what's left of the core of the Democratic Party becoming more extreme, whatever word you want to say, but it runs counter to what the polls are saying that Republicans, independents, and a growing number of remaining Democrats want.
It's almost like the Democratic Party leadership is doubling down on policies and things they're doing to alienate their base. I take example this gentleman that was deported from Maryland, right? I think the most brilliant meme, I guess we'd call it, was released by the White House. It was a picture of President Trump consoling and interviewing and talking to a mother who lost her daughter in Maryland to violence. She was murdered by an illegal immigrant. And the picture next to it is a Maryland senator, congressman, meeting with the gentleman who was deported for multiple reasons. So, I mean, they're just missing the boat, I mean, and then the legacy media and social media is painting this guy as being a Maryland man, father and husband and hardworking guy or what have you. I don't think any of that's true.
And the thing is that to me, this situation with that individual, his name is Kilmar Abrego Garcia. It encapsulates actually everything that we're talking about, everything I would say that those CNN and NBC polls are picking up on. Because when you look at it, the first thing that happened is that he was deported. Now, he is an illegal immigrant. That's not debated. He was deported. As soon as he was deported and the Trump administration was approached by the legal team that was representing his family, the Trump administration said, wait, this was an administrative error. Now, that doesn't mean it was the right thing to do or necessarily even an excuse, but they admitted that it was an administrative error. Then it went to the courts for the courts to then order the Trump administration to bring him back, and because there was a previous order saying that because of how his gang involvement, his MS-13 involvement when he lived in El Salvador, got to the point where there was a rival gang that was actively looking to kill him. And so he was granted basically immunity, being able to stay in America for those reasons. But he was sent back. Then the courts were approached, and the court the judge said that the Trump administration needs to bring him back to America. Then the Trump administration took it to the Supreme Court. Now, I know these are a lot of details, but this is very important because when you look at how it's portrayed in the media, that the courts and the Supreme Court ordered the Trump administration to bring him back. That is not the case. What ended up happening is the Supreme Court changed the order of the lower court and said, no, 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 you have to greatly weaken the language. Instead of saying effectuate and facilitate the return, you have to remove the stronger word effectuate, facilitate, which simply means you have to look into trying to get them back. And you, the lower court, you also have to reword what you even mean by facilitate so that you are not going beyond the letter of the law and trying to order the executive branch or the presidency what to do. And this was a complete unanimous 9-0 decision. In other words, the Supreme Court of the United States, liberal justices included, were completely in agreement with this, that there is very little push that the Trump administration has to give, right or wrong. But when you look at how it's portrayed in the media, it is called a constitutional crisis. When there is a 9-0 agreement in the Supreme Court and not one single dissent, that is the furthest thing from a constitutional crisis. That is agreement. And yet the media is portraying it the exact opposite. That is a large part of the problem that we have noticed for years now.
Yeah, and I mean, and whether you believe this gentleman should have been deported or not, the truth is that the Democrat leadership is not reading the room, and that's their major issue. They don't know their own party. 72% of Americans in the last poll surveyed said they believe that all, not some, all illegal aliens should leave the country. Period. That's 72% of Americans. Now just take the 50 percent away that are Republicans. You still have a large percentage of Democrats that believe the same thing. So whether you support what Trump did, whether you think it's a constitutional crisis, which we both agree, if the Supreme Court rules 9-0, it's not a constitutional anything. It's a bunch of hyperbole. But the bottom line is that the Democratic leadership again is doubling down on a man who, by the way, it's interesting to me. If you look at the CNN coverage, they now blur out his hands. Have you noticed that? They literally deliberately blur out his hands. I asked the viewers why. Why are they blurring out his hands? Because he has MS-13 tattoos on his hands. That's why. Gang affiliated tattoos on his hands. This gentleman also said that the reason he needed asylum in the United States was because a rival gang wanted to do violence to him. Gang members don't do violence to other civilians. They do it to other gang members. He also was stopped by the Tennessee police, the state police, for trafficking human beings and released by the Biden FBI and White House. They were told to let this gentleman go, and he did. They let him go. He's got domestic violence charges against him. His own wife has put out a ex parte order against him, alleging that he was violent to her and the children. This is who the Democrats are putting as their spokeshero. This is the guy that they're going to lay it on the line for to try to bring back to this country. They're not reading the room.
And that's a large part of the issue, is that, and it's not just about reading the room per se, but it's about understanding how average people see things. As you pointed out, 72% of Americans want all illegal immigrants to be deported. I actually wouldn't even put myself in the category of someone who wants every illegal immigrant deported. However, even when, like you said, when you take out the 50% of Republicans, you're still left with 40% of the non quote unquote conservative population that also wants illegal immigrants deported. And yet, what the Democratic Party has done is not only are they violating what is the wisdom of the people, but also they are doing it because they're saying that they are representing the Hispanic population. But when you go down to El Salvador in Central America, the person who they are in part trying to vilify is the president of El Salvador, Bukele. And Bukele and Donald Trump are very good friends. They get along very well. And Bukele is becoming very quickly someone who perhaps I would phrase as the George Washington of Central America. He is a great hero in Central America for having brought peace in a very war-torn and crime-torn nation that is positively affecting the rest of Central America now. And this is the person, this popularity is who the Democrats are trying to fight against. On what grounds? That is the question, because they're not doing it on legal grounds. Are they claiming it on moral grounds? This is the issue that so many people have that they're finding with the Democratic Party and where it's at this point in time.
Yeah, I'm like you. I'm a moderate. I believe in a pathway to citizenship for people who are trying hard. But I also believe that we should deport every single illegal alien that's committed a crime. If they're committed a crime, especially a violent crime against an American, they need to go. Period. They need to go. And I'm a moderate. I'm in the middle. I'm the guy that the Democrats want to get back to that party, and I ain't feeling it either. But the bottom line is that the whole situation has become so angry on both sides, but especially on the far left. I mean, the elephant in the room is Trump derangement syndrome, which I see all the time. Look, I did not vote for Trump in the first election. I have, he's not was not my first pick many times, but the bottom line is that he's the president of the United States. You either support the president or you don't, but you don't have to hate on the guy so badly that it warps the way you think. And this is what I see over and over and over again when I talk to my liberal friends. And I have plenty of liberal friends who I talk to. One gentleman is he is very, very adamant that Trump is anti-gay. Now he's a gay gentleman. He's a friend of mine. We served in the military together. I love him like a brother, but we cannot talk about Trump. He literally gets his blood boiling, thinking that Trump is anti-gay. What do you think about the position that Trump is anti-gay?
Well, it doesn't necessarily hold water if you think about it from the perspective that he has, I believe, more gay cabinet members than any president has previously. And he also has the highest ranking gay cabinet member in the history of our country. So there's quite a few. I remember years ago, he was accused of being anti-Semitic. And yet he has his grandchildren. His daughter is very openly Jewish, is a convert to Judaism. And so there's a number of accusations that just have not held up water over the years. And yes, that is just another example, because again, going back to the CNN poll that's showing that in his first term, 33% of Democrats wanted the Democratic Party to actively fight his policies. Now it's 65%. And yet at the same time, nationally, his approval ratings are the highest in his 10-year political career. And so the question becomes, where is the argument coming from to continue to double down on these policies?
I don't even see it as an argument. It's just all emotion. It's all emotion. When you actually talk to, like my friend, when I talked to him about the facts you just mentioned, he has 5 cabinet members, one of the highest ranking cabinet members, the 5th in line for the presidency, is an actively gay man. The reason that nobody really knows about it is because, number one, the legacy media won't cover it, and number two, nobody cares. Republicans don't care by and large what your sexuality is. We don't care. It is a meritocracy. It is what can you do? And this is how I see Trump working. Okay, now look, I'm a Bostonian. Trump is a New Yorker. I don't like the guy just from being from New York. Okay, but I also see the fact that many of his personality issues that people have problems with, the way he's very direct, the way he calls names, things like that, that's very New Yorkish. I mean, that's a guy from New York, and I understand people don't like that. I personally, I'm not big on New Yorkers, right? But the bottom line is he effective at his job? Is he effective at his job? And he is. The majority of American people are thrilled with the way the country's going right now.
Yes, and absolutely correct. And as a fellow New Yorker, I can actually verify that his personality is what we would consider perhaps a traditional New York City personality. Think Mayor Ed Koch, and a number of other individuals. That is how New Yorkers speak. And I have spoken to other New Yorkers over the years, and we have talked exactly about that so much of how he's interpreted is really just a misunderstanding of the personality of what New Yorkers especially were like 30, 40 years ago. Not that they're that much different today, but yeah, I mean, the idea that, and the media has taken advantage of that to the extent that they have brought more and more division based on portrayal, based on how he describes things. And that is something that has hurt us as a nation. And we have to make a decision. Do we really want to continue to go down this road where where we have a less competitive political environment because more and more people are not associating with one particular political party? I don't think that's best for our country. I think that that hurts us as a nation. And however, there needs to be a change within the Democratic Party, a recognition of what's happening, and some type of a change that actually does bring towards the middle. I think that that debate has been settled. That the majority of Democrats, 52%, wanting to go back to the middle more, that they are correct. I believe that we can say that that is a settled debate. However, is that really what's going to happen?
If the Democrats don't find moderate, reasonable leadership to step up and replace these leftist, left-leaning leadership they have now, if they don't find those moderates to come, they're going to be losing the next series of elections. There's no doubt about it. They have lost the American public, and because of their far left policies. And we haven't even talked about the far right policies. And I know that we both, the far right, a lot of the far right policies and things, we don't stand for a lot of that stuff either. That's nonsense. There's nonsense on both sides. But it's true. The truth is that the nonsense on the liberal left has literally taken them out of the fight, and they are doubling and tripling down on policies and procedures on the left that has hijacked the entire party.
Absolutely. And when you break it down to Maryland, as far as the Maryland government goes, this year during this legislative session that just ended a few weeks ago, they had to weaken the support of Maryland's pensioners, government employees of Maryland, teachers, police officers, and just administrators and permitting offices around the state. Their pensions have been weakened as a result of the financial situation that has changed so dramatically in just 2 years. These are the type of changes that are going to become more and more apparent over time. And so things need to change today because the damage continues to grow.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in both parties need to be healthy in order for our democracy to be healthy. I want a healthy Democratic Party, a healthy Republican Party, and people in the middle choose the government that they want for that period of time. And that's I believe what a healthy democracy looks like. Any final thoughts?
No, I'm just glad that as a Bostonian, you're able to be friends with me, a New Yorker, and vice versa.
Takes a lot of work, man. Takes a lot of work. You haven't worn any Yankees gear in here, so that's okay.
A challenge accepted.
Yeah, no, do not do that. You won't be in the room. We won't be interviewing. Hey, listen, I definitely have enjoyed talking to you. Look, these are our opinions. This is Ethan. My name is Mark. These are our opinions. We're two guys in the middle. I mean, and the truth is that we need to bring more people into the middle. People should be fighting less about politics and sitting around, like Tip O'Neill and Reagan did, drink a beer, realize we're all Americans. We all want really the same things. We want our families to be well. We want to have a good job that pays our bills. We want to have a modicum of peace. We want the government to stop messing with us. These are the basic tenets of almost every American that I know. And the truth is that we're not going to get there with just one party on either side, even full control. Okay, this has been Mark Flynn.
Ethan Lowen.
And this has been Mid-Maryland Votes and our take on the division between the parties. Have a great night, and I hope you will join us again.